So, my dear, you're welcome to hang out with us, and we're going to switch over to our next candidate.
I'm gonna let Mimi do her thing because Mimi's incredible, and I'm gonna exit out, but I'll watch I'll watch.
Okay, absolutely.
Bye, Mondaire. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Good luck.
Thank you.
And I would like to introduce the next candidate on our pre-primary edition of the People Before Politics radio show, Westchester District Attorney candidate Mimi Rocah. Welcome to the show. I originally wanted to have you on. Black Westchester does not endorse a lot of the local races, but we thought that this race was too important not to lend our support behind the candidate we believed was the best candidate, because this is such an important election as far as criminal justice and all of that is concerned. So it is we announced, we announced that we are endorsing you. Black Westchester has endorsed you and giving you the cover of the paper, which only the digital issue came out because we didn't do the print. But and I welcome you to the show to give people one last look, especially if they're undecided, why they should vote for you.
Well, first of all, thank you, AJ and Damon, for having me on tonight and for endorsing me. I mean, I do understand that you didn't do that lightly, and I really appreciate it. And I feel like, you know, we've really gotten to know each other these past couple of months, and so I know that that's an endorsement that came from, you know, from your heart in a way, and from what you believe in. And I think we share a lot of the same beliefs and values about what needs to happen and what needs to change in our criminal justice system. And, you know, at the end of the day, I mean, I can get into policy differences between my opponent and I, and I will, but let me just say that basically what it comes down to on Tuesday is voters have a decision to make about a real choice. And it is, you know, we're both Democrats, it's true, and this isn't about who's more of a Democrat than the other one, or, you know, who hates Trump more or anything like that. It's about who has a vision and the passion and the you know, the innovation to really work to change our criminal justice system. And quite frankly, the current DA does really well at doing lip service. You know, he says a lot of things. He calls himself a progressive prosecutor, puts a lot of labels up on his website and links and photo ops. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have a vision. He doesn't, I don't even know that he totally understands what's happening in the country right now. And I think it was starting long before the murder of George Floyd. I mean, I've been talking with you guys. I remember I was on back in, I think it was January or maybe even December when I first announced. And we were talking about the need for real, meaningful criminal justice reform. But now it's even more important because we can have all these ideas, but now we have the movement. We have the time when I think you can really make these things reality. Now, you know, how exactly it's all going to play out and who we're going to get to agree to everything, you know, yeah, it's going to take a lot of work. It's not going to be easy. We know that. But if you don't have the vision and you don't have the passion and you don't understand why criminal justice reform is so important, then you're not going to make it happen. And at the end of the day, the reason why it's important is because we have to end the racism in our criminal justice system. We have to end the racial disparities and the unfair racial disparities in our criminal justice system. And we have to end police brutality and corruption. And police brutality and corruption is only going to end or be whittled down, you know, so it is not a common occurrence in our culture, which it is right now, unfortunately. While we have many, many good police officers and law enforcement, unfortunately, this is way too common. And it's only going to end if we have accountability. And this DA has shown himself over and over incapable of, for whatever reason, of bringing the cases that are necessary to bring and doing the work that's necessary to do, which is hard, to hold police officers accountable. And at the end of the day, that is something that I am going to be proud to do, because as a prosecutor for over 16 years, I believe that when you have police corruption and police brutality, it actually is first of all just morally wrong. It is it can be racist if it's directed at Black and brown people, and it makes the job of law enforcement harder. So I want to help, revitalize the idea of law enforcement as a force for good in this country and in this county. And we need to start doing that, brick by brick. So I think that's what it comes down to. It's leadership, it's vision, it's passion about changing the system, not accepting the status quo. That's the main choice that voters have, and it's a stark one.
Right. And I want to be clear too. I want to say, when you look at the national attention, the protests in cities in every one of the 50 states and in over 20 countries, the demand for change, a protest that is probably the biggest protest in this country since the shooting of Martin Luther King, which I was 2, like in that era there, like I wasn't around to really understand what was going on. I've never seen a protest of this magnitude. And for Westchester County voters, if we continue to vote for a district attorney who has turned a blind eye on corruption, all of your marching and protesting is is just thrown out the window. And I just wanted to say in our endorsement to you, I wrote this and I want to read it. So first, let me start with why we feel that we need a change in the district attorney's office. Because you just can't make statements like that haphazardly. While we have not been able to figure out why our current DA has consistently turned a blind eye to police and governmental corruption since he's been in office, even though his website makes the case for his reelection, says he's been bold and progressive in the execution of justice. Scarpino ran on prosecuting corruption, but has shown himself to be a little more than a male version of his predecessor, Janet D. Fior. At least Janet D. Fior did prosecute 2 Yonkers cops, but it was more to cover herself because she prosecuted several cases these officers were involved in, and that's if you can call 8 to 20 weeks of weekends in jail a prosecution. I'm not sure if it's, and this is what I wrote, AJ Black Westchester, I'm not sure whether it's incompetence, ineptitude, or just plain submissiveness. Westchester County District Attorney Anthony Scarpino his failure to investigate, indict, and prosecute corruption has given individuals like Joseph Spezio here in Mount Vernon carte blanche to just steal from taxpayers. There have been several cases that we've covered, a case in missing guns in Eastchester, a case with $200K missing from the White Plains PBA. I have been informed by very good sources that he basically had enough for what do you call them cases? A RICO case against Spezio, but yet he closed the investigation. I've talked to others that he's closed investigations without even speaking to victims. We've had several cases in Mount Vernon. We have one individual who has cost Mount Vernon over $3 million in excessive force complaint payouts, yet he was not on this bad cop list. Like, if anybody's credibility should be questioned, he should be on there. But he shouldn't be still working. That's beside the point. But he was on. He was not on the bad cop list, which we pressured him to put out because he hadn't put out because his investigator was on the list. And you can just go to Black Westchester and search his name and see the wealth of articles and stuff that we. So this is not personal. This is from a long list of situations that we feel he has failed, and especially failed the city he calls home and claims to love, Mount Vernon. So these are what has gone into, and I've had extensive conversations and interview with Mimi Rocah, and these are what went into us stepping up to endorse Mimi for a district attorney, and why we feel, especially with the climate going on right now, we need to make a change, and we need to make a change. If you didn't vote, you need to make a change on Tuesday and protest at the ballot box and get Scarpino out. And that's
exactly.
That's what I have to say.
I want to say I didn't. With everything, I was so busy, man. These Zoom forums are just it's just overwhelming. But I wanted to make sure tonight that I say it live in defense of you, Mimi, because I didn't see it, but I've got calls from people from Greenburgh and White Plains when he falsely said that you failed the Kenneth Chamberlain family. I have the letter, and I think when you go that low, right? When you're that desperate that you want to invoke someone's family member that was killed by police and that was seeking justice, and to try to tie you into something that you had nothing to do about. Like only people that deal with the Southern District, deal with police, write the letters, know that it wasn't you. And I want people to know, especially in the White Plains, Greenburgh area, it was never Mimi Rocah, right? It was never Mimi Rocah, and I have the letter, and I'm going to post it later. The letter from Randolph Scott McLaughlin, who is the attorney for the Chamberlain estate and Kenneth Chamberlain, and Mimi has never been mentioned in that. It was David Kennedy. Anybody has been dealing with police brutality in Westchester County know that we will reach out to David Kennedy. Mimi's name has never been mentioned. I didn't even know, and I'm always writing letters. I never wrote one letter to Mimi about police oversight or anything. But for him to invoke that, I think that's a sign of desperation, and it's a sign of somebody that we can't trust, right? In the office of the highest law enforcement officer, in charge in Westchester County, when they will lie and put their opponent in an investigation in a case that she had nothing to do with from the beginning.
I appreciate you bringing that up, Damon, and that's right. I mean, the fact is I had absolutely nothing to do with that investigation. The reason that the person you mentioned, David Kennedy, is on the letter, and it's interesting, if Mr. Scarpino doesn't know that, then that's kind of surprising that he's been the DA for 3.5 years and he doesn't know that David Kennedy is, look, he does the civil and the civil rights work for all of the Southern District. And the fact of the matter is that the federal case concerning Mr. Chamberlain's killing was a civil rights case. And, we can talk about, whether that case should have gone forward. I can offer opinions on that, but I wasn't part of the decision making. But the fact of the matter is, and this is, I know from talking with you and Kenneth Jr., that he understands this, that the main way to hold police responsible at this moment in time, given the structure of our system, is not through federal civil rights actions. It is through criminal actions at the district attorney level. And it can't, maybe, look, there is, I think, a good argument that the federal civil rights statute is way too narrow. It is such a it's even harder than the burden for proving, murder of different levels at the state level, because of the racial intent that you have to show for the federal civil rights action. And I'm not saying, it's not that those should never be brought, but we can't just punt it over and say that we're relying on the federal level. It has to start at the DA level or the Attorney General. It has to be at the state level. Police brutality cases need to be treated like other criminal cases. That's the bottom line. And they're not right now, right? They are given kind of it's like criminal cases, understandably, and should be hard to prove. I mean, the beyond a reasonable doubt, it should be a very high standard. Prosecutors should not be easily able to prosecute anyone for any crime. But for police officers, it's sort of like there's this built-in extra protection, you know, because they're police officers. And I think that's actually kind of upside down, because the bottom line is, if they're police officers and they're entrusted with the public trust, then when that is violated, they need to be held accountable, because how else can we trust our system, our criminal justice system, our police forces, if we aren't holding them to that standard of public trust? So I think, yeah, I mean, it's clearly an act of desperation, trying to throw me into something because he can't stand on his own record. So he's trying to somehow, you know, mix mine up. And he's done it in other examples too. Right. But the bottom line is the failure of our system, and not just in Westchester, but certainly also in Westchester, is the failure to even investigate these cases. I mean, let's look at the reporting about Mount Vernon, right? He sat on these recordings for 9 months. We now know through the second set of recordings that when the police officer and his attorney came back after 9 months and said, hey, what have you done? They said, okay, well, who are we supposed to be talking to? What's his name? Where does he live? I mean, 9 months, you know, basic information. And then in Mr. Scarpino's own words over the past couple of weeks, what did they do for the investigation? They asked the police officers who were under investigation if they wanted to come in and talk to him. Really? I mean, that's what you do in like a traffic accident. You take people's statements. It's not what you do in police corruption cases. Those are the cases where prosecutors should aggressively investigate. You try to do undercover work in the first place, which now we've lost that opportunity. And you use the power of the grand jury, you use search warrants. I mean, there's all sorts of tools that absolutely were not touched. And Mr. Scarpino can say, well, she doesn't know what we've done. You're right. I don't know what you've done. But what I know is what you haven't done. I know you didn't track down the drug dealer, he calls himself a drug dealer, narcotics dealer, that the reporter found, who was framed and whose story matches exactly what is on the tape of one of the police officers.
Exactly.
He said no one ever spoke to him. So I know what you didn't do. And it's really remarkable. And I know that you kept using those police officers to prosecute cases, to swear out search warrants, to swear out arrest warrants. That to me is really stunning, you know, that even with these serious allegations and some degree of proof, even if you weren't yet prosecuting them, it's not like these were just, you know, kind of, oh, well, someone said something. I mean, we have real substance here. I'm not even talking about, you know, the charges, but you stop using the police. You don't keep arresting people and searching people based on those police officers while they're supposedly under serious investigation. That is the whole problem with conviction integrity that he also doesn't seem to understand.
Right.
Right. And I just want to say, and one since he had these tapes last year, these cops should have been on the bad cop list, because their integrity was definitely questionable at the time, and that's what this list is about. And these cops are also not on the list.
Right. I thought about that too, right? And yet he had police officers on who had DUIs from 1985, who frankly, you know, that's not a straightforward credibility issue. So yeah, I don't know how he decided that. But you see that he either didn't understand or didn't take seriously that there were problems with, again, not talking necessarily about even the could these cops be charged or not, right? Sitting here right now, I don't know that for sure. Right. It looks to me like there's a lot of meat on that case, but I can't say that right now. He's right about that. What I can say is that there was a real investigation to be done here that was not done, and that he should have stopped using them, but because he didn't even think to put him on this list. And that to me is a failure of one of the most basic principles and responsibilities of a prosecutor. It is just a total failure of ethics to not pursue this kind of case, to keep using those police officers as if it was business as usual.
Wait, I'm sorry. So our co-host, who's not here, Dr. Robert Basketball, Dr. Bob, he said, dude, ain't hard to find. AJ and I used to see him outside Richard Thomas' campaign office on 4th Avenue all the time in 2015. So he was always, and I know he looked familiar when I saw him. That's why I remember him. But that's what bothered me about that case, because with this, and furthered my point. That I even made a video yesterday. He said that there wasn't enough information, or he said it was all what's the word?
Hearsay. He said hearsay. Well, he tried that at first.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
his claims about why he didn't do anything have changed.
Right.
Go ahead.
So and this is my limited understanding on how this works. But in my understanding, as the district attorney who has subpoena power, and the other thing he said, no witnesses came forward, right? It's your job to then subpoena some people and get some information firsthand that you can get and investigate. Would you wait for a witness to come? That's like somebody sitting home that does not have a job for 3 years and said he's not working because nobody knocked on his door and said, do you want a job? Like, to me, I have a problem with that. And shout out to Joe Murray, who's listening, who is the attorney for the officer we're talking about.
Well, and what's even more like, and I know Campo, I know Campo, but that tape, you got the officer saying he gave the drugs back, to the drug dealer. Like that's crazy. Like that is unheard of, and I really feel bad because some of these guys I know, from working with my wife, but like to hear something like that, and that's not enough evidence to bring him in.
Well,
at least bring him in for questioning.
Because when the first story came out, which didn't include the first news report, which didn't include the excerpts from the recordings with Officer Campo, Mr. Scarpino said, "Oh, it's all hearsay. We couldn't charge it. It's all hearsay, right?" First of all, I don't agree with that. But okay, let's even say that wasn't the point. The point was, why didn't you investigate it? And then when the second story came out, and all of a sudden it had someone basically admitting something on tape that clearly any first-year law student would know is hearsay, Mr. Scarpino changed his, why he didn't do anything. He said, now he started saying, well, she doesn't know what we've done. Like he dropped the whole hearsay argument because he couldn't make it. It's like he doesn't even know what's on the tapes.
Right.
He was making an argument that didn't hold up when the second story came out with those recordings, because I'm not sure he still to this day knows what's on those recordings. And that's not blaming, frankly, an investigator or a prosecutor in his office. That is a failure of his leadership. Because if you're the DA and someone comes into the office with this kind of information, he's right. You don't just say, okay, we can charge this, but you make that a top priority in your office. I mean, because it is about the integrity of the whole system. The whole system doesn't work if we don't thoroughly get to the bottom of this. And if the whole integrity of the whole system doesn't work, then who can we trust? And I say that as a prosecutor who comes in with some, inherent trust in the system. But I'm not going to trust it unless I get to the bottom, like nook and cranny bottom of whether these allegations have any degree of truth. One, whether I can charge them, but then even if I can't charge them, is there some truth here? Is there something going on that needs to be addressed, even if not through the criminal process? And he didn't even try that. To this day, I think he still doesn't know.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm sorry, David. Joe Murray said, I heard ADA Hustleby, I'm not sure if you pronounce it right, resigned the day after the story came out. He was just a sacrificial lamb. I didn't know that.
Well, I think January 1st there'll be a lot of resignations.
Well, look, I mean, as someone who's worked as a supervisor, I mean, I wasn't the U.S. attorney, but I did head up the White Plains office, and I've supervised people for years, as a prosecutor. At the end of the day, the buck stopped with me and then with my superiors, right? I had to, it was my job to train the prosecutors to do the right thing. It was my job to
Right.
make sure that they knew that when something like that came in, they dropped everything and treated it like the 5-alarm fire that it should be, and that I was looped into it. Okay. And so, you know, I'm not, I mean, I don't know these individual prosecutors, but at the end of the day, this is not about them. This is about the leadership in the office.
Right.
And so I hope that, you know, the prosecutors there understand that this isn't me attacking them. I think that it is up to the district attorney and the chiefs and the supervisors in the office
Exactly.
to appropriately train the prosecutors. And I'm gonna try that. Everyone has a chance with me, you know, but they can blow that chance, right? If they show in any way that they don't prioritize integrity over everything else as a prosecutor, that's it. That to me is a hard line to draw.
Let me ask you a question. Is there a culture of worrying about numbers than justice? Worrying about how many cases you get settled or plea bargain, and knowing that these cops, they're not credible, but we're just gonna get a plea. We know we can't go to trial, right? Because if the defendant has any type of decent lawyer, right? You know, if they have Mayo, if they hire Mayo, they're not going to trial, right? So they know, you know, certain things like that. So, you know, is there almost like policing where
we lose? I think Damon froze.
I think Damon, he looks frozen. He never is quiet for that long.
Yeah. I think Damon froze.
I say that with love.
Yeah, and we'll have him back in a minute.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for Damon's video to come back in, I got phone calls, and I promised that I would ask you this question. Someone who is in law said they still undecided on who they're going to vote for, and they said one of the things they have never heard you speak about in any of your interviews was the kind of diversity. And speaking about diversity in the office, what you would do to bring more diversity to the office. They said they never heard. I said, I think I've heard us say that a few times, but you know what? Since the person, and I just texted them to tell them to tune in, and I was going to ask this question. So you're speaking to them and whoever else about
I'm happy to speak to them, and I'm happy to speak to them. Yeah, directly. No, I definitely talked a lot about it, but you know, look, there's a lot of talk out there right now, and it's hard for people to catch every one of it. And in fact, several of the people and groups that have endorsed me have, you know, made that like something, you know, one of the main things we've talked about is how am I going to diversify this office? Why? Because Mr. Scarpino came in promising to diversify the office and hasn't really done it. You know, he's got, you know, I mean, it looks like tokenism, right? Like he's appointed one Black person to an executive position, and you know that's what he hangs his hat on. And that's not so much about diversity as it is about having a talking point for your campaign, which is exactly one of the problems I have with his leadership style. The way to really diversify the office is, first of all, to be transparent about it. Like right now, nobody has any real idea of what the office started at when he came in and what progress he's really made. He throws numbers out there like, I've increased by 50% the diversity of the office. 50%, well, what did it start at? And I don't even know if that's, I mean, he says different percentages at different times.
Right.
We need real numbers, okay? And also, what does diversity mean? I mean, I you know, look, I saw several hires that he did between September and December. And, you know, I think only one of them out of 6 was a non-white person. Several of them were white males. Now, I'm not saying all white males are bad and you can't hire any, but we need to look at the whole picture, first of all. Like, and we need, and I need to give you, the public, the people I work for, the real numbers, right? So you can see what I'm talking about and not playing the shell game. And then I also need a plan. And I've pledged to come up with a plan in my first, 100 days in office, as they say, although I hope it doesn't take me that long. But I already have a lot of ideas. I mean, first and foremost, what we need to do is we need to attract a new generation of people to become prosecutors, who want to become prosecutors. Because the fact of the matter is that right now, it's probably not that appealing to Black people, to brown people, to women, to people, LGBTQ people, to be prosecutors. And so how are we going to diversify the office if they don't even want the job in the first place? Well, how do we make it more appealing? Well, we start redefining what it means to be a prosecutor, that
Right.
It isn't, to Damon's point that he was making, that it's not just about numbers and convictions.
Right.
It's actually a public service. And when I interview people in the U.S. Attorney's Office, I wasn't the person who ultimately made the hiring decisions. That was, the U.S. Attorney. But I was on a committee that helped, field the applicants. And one of the top questions that we always ask, and I think is really important, is why do you want this job, right? Why do people want to become a prosecutor? Is it because they want to have trial experience? Is it because they think cops and robbers are cool? Or is it because they want to do public service? And if so, what's their track record in that? Because those are the people I want in this job. I want people who believe and look at this as a form of public service, because it should be. I don't know that it is always, but it should be. And so that's part of it. And then we've got to go and we've got to recruit. We can't just sit back and wait for the applications to come to us and fall in our lap of the right applicants. We've got to go and recruit. We did a lot of that in the Southern District. We did panels at law schools for Black Bar Association groups, Black law student groups. Go out and what the job is, encourage them to apply, go to law schools where you're going to have more minority students so that you have a bigger pool of applicants. I mean, there's a lot to do, and take recommendations from the community. Now, everybody goes through the same hiring process no matter what, no matter who they're recommended by. But of course, people in the community here, are going to know people at law schools here and jobs here who they think might be good applicants. And we have to have a rigorous application process too, so that we're getting people with the right integrity and system of belief about what justice means.
Right. I think you're 100% right. When Scarpino first got into office, the Black community in Westchester put out an olive branch. We understood, and many organizations, the NAACP, the Urban League, multiple organizations, we understood that he was not Janet DeFiore, and we tried to be clear with him that the frustration that the community has against the district attorney is not against him personally. It's just what has went on under Janet, and he had a great opportunity. He had a great opportunity, to change that. And like you said, we asked for, look, let's let the community play a role in the process. If you're looking for Black applicants, male, female, Latino applicants, come to us. We could reach out. We could be the ears to the ground and put it out there for people that might want in the district attorney's office. He did none of that. And when it came to the opening of his chief investigator, he didn't even put out that there was an opening, right? And we heard it through the grapevine, through flies on the wall, that look, this is what's going on. He needs to hire. But by the time the community got together to even submit, he hired Chief McNerney from Greenberg Police Department. So I tell people all the time, a lot of people don't know. Since Lattimore came into office, every other month he meets with stakeholders from different civil rights organizations and organizations every other month. Sometimes the meetings are great, sometimes the meetings are bad, but we come out with an understanding that, hey, listen, we want better for our county, we want better for our law enforcement departments, and we want to see reform. And that's it. It's a work in progress. You can't change 100 years of racism and racial bias in one term. We know that it's a reality. But at least Lattimore is sitting down at the table. He's taking applications. He's taking recommendations, and we expected the same from. But he just didn't do it. It was crazy. And then when it came to the corruption, it's just like he put blinders on. He put blinders on, and then they were stopping investigations. How do you stop an investigation and you don't even talk to the complainant, right? You don't even call the complainant up and say, hey, listen, what's going on? I got your paperwork. I got that. I know of former police commissioners went there with evidence. He didn't do nothing. Councilman Andre Wallace, as many times he went up to, even being assaulted, didn't do anything. So, after a while, you just figure either he doesn't want to do anything or someone in his office doesn't want to do anything, and they're influencing him, not to do anything. And I think he has made a grave mistake, and hopefully the people of Mount Vernon and the people of Westchester, this election would make the right choice, to try to change this around, because it's just getting worse. It's really just getting worse. And you know what? And what kills me, for the life of me, I can't understand why no other elected official is really being vocal on it. I mean, because people are getting hurt out here, and it's crazy. I mean, it's law enforcement, right? And nobody's going to say anything. Like, somebody has to say something, right? Somebody has to say something. And if your district attorney is not going to say anything, and then, like Joseph Murray said, and he's watching, if you go to the feds, right, as the lawyer for Bevell, so the feds will call a diesel that we're investigating. So that stops the feds. So now they put the hold on the feds, even if the feds say, you know what, this guy got some credible stuff. Let's see what's going on. Well, first let's call Scarpino and see. Well, we're investigating. So they said, well, all right, they're already investigating. We're not going to do this.
One of Scarpino's many different sort of defenses of himself that he came up with over the past couple of weeks when he was still willing to debate me, because now he stopped. He wouldn't even agree to the News 12 debate. Just didn't agree to a date. Okay. I wish News 12 had it anyway.
Exactly.
But that's not how it works.
He didn't agree to a Black Westchester debate either. He never answered us back about that.
No, he stopped debating me about, I don't know. I can't remember when the last one was, but he said we'd done it several times and that was enough. I would have liked some more opportunities, but anyway, one of his defenses of himself, of why he hadn't, charged the police officers or even investigated it, is he kept saying the FBI has looked at this and they said there's no case. Well, guess what came out in the latest reporting? That the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, my old office, just asked the attorney for the whistleblower police officer for the recordings, because they did it and they didn't even have the recordings.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it's look, this is a case that frankly should be looked at the state level. It should have been, and that was a wasted opportunity that we can't get back. But if the AG doesn't take over the case, then yeah, I mean, I hope that the feds now will look at it.
Now, as I know a lot of people who feel that the district attorney office has failed them. If we have a new district attorney in, does that district attorney have the power to then go backwards and look at some of the cases where the ball has been dropped, or you just have to move forward? Like,
oh, no, absolutely. I mean, first starting with the cold case murders, right, which he never looked at, that he said he was going to. I mean, there's I don't know the number offhand, but there's a whole list of cold case murders. I mean, some of them we know about, and I've heard directly from people in Mount Vernon, victims, family members, as well as advocates who have gone to the DA's office and said, we really want you to look at these. We need to get closure for the families. And he basically just said no. He just, which I just really don't understand. So that, but also cases where, yes, where they declined to prosecute or didn't bring a prosecution, absolutely, you can go back. The problem is that in a case like the Mount Vernon tapes case, as we've been calling it, there are certain opportunities we'll just never get back, and that's a fact. Like, there were opportunities there before this became public to do some kind of, what we call covert or undercover type of action, like getting a wiretap or doing search warrants, as I said, on people's phones. I mean, that's just, obviously you can't do that now. You don't have to be a prosecutor or a police officer or an agent to know that opportunity is gone. And it's not the reporter's fault. I mean, it's the fault is that the failure to act went on for so long that people finally, including the reporter, felt like, okay, this story has to get out because this is just sitting there and no one's doing anything.
No.
So yes, there's still work to be done there, but I am afraid that, and so my question is, in the context of this campaign, well, what other missed opportunities, what else are we missing now? This is the one we know about. What else has there been inaction on and failure to really look at the conduct, whether it rises to the level of criminal conduct, whether we've done a thorough, real investigation. And then even below that, like, even if you're not going to charge someone, are there police officers that you shouldn't be using as a prosecutor? I just don't think he sees that as part of his job, but it is. And then if there are things that you find that a police officer has done wrong, or anyone, a medical examiner, there's other people involved in cases, or a prosecutor, if you find that there are things that they've done wrong, have they gone back and looked at all the other cases that this was worked on? And I know he's not doing that. And that's something, really, really important to do.
I was very impressed when watching the district attorney from Atlanta hand down the charges in the killing of Rayshard Brooks. And in addition, in handing out the charges, the criminal charges, he then handed out violation of oath charges, which I had never seen before. I'm not saying it never happened, but I had never seen a DA do that before in any of these kind of cases. And I was like, wow, when you don't see what a DA is supposed to look like, you're like, that's what a DA is supposed to look like. Like, I just was, he didn't throw the book, he threw books at these individuals. And I thought that was strong and a great example, especially with what we're going through right now.
And the other thing that DA did is he was very transparent, right? He didn't just get up there and say, okay, this is what I'm charging. He said, he walked everyone through it. This is what happened. Here's the evidence reviewed. Here are the people we've spoken to. So, and then here are the charges, and here's why we think this charge is appropriate. That, to me, was one of the most remarkable things. Now, look, it's not always possible for someone in law enforcement to be that transparent about criminal charges because, again, for the reasons I was talking about earlier, sometimes you have to keep things under wraps, close to the vest, for purposes of enhancing the investigation. But he was this DA was at a point where he felt he could be overt about it. He did it quickly. And that's in contrast to the DA in Minneapolis and the murder of George Floyd, who several days after the murder came out, and I remember this news conference because it was disturbing. He was making these very, they hadn't charged anything yet, and it was, well, we're investigating, but there's some evidence that cuts against charging. And it was this very vague statement that I think really contributed. I mean, it wasn't the only cause, but it contributed to the outrage of the moment because it was like, wait, what? What evidence? What are you talking about? Either explain it or don't. but don't make vague statements like that in that kind of situation. It's too important. So I think it goes back to the point about prosecutors, when at all possible, being transparent, not just imposing decisions on people, right? Because there's some people who don't like what the prosecutor in Atlanta did. But you know what? At least they have to give him credit for explaining it. And they can argue with the decision. I understand that's what's going to happen. But it's not just being imposed on people. It's real explanation of his whole thought process. And I really respect that. I mean, that's something I would strive to do. Again, you can't always be perfect at that. But I think just when you want a whole community who is going to disagree on whatever decision you make, some people are going to like it and some people aren't, then you better be able to try and explain it if you can, particularly in this time. And I wanted to mention, we were talking about conviction integrity. I just wanted to mention the person that, frankly, I found out about through your show that was incredible, when you had on Karen Neuwirth from the Exoneration Project. Yes. Because she runs an exoneration, an organization dedicated to exonerating people who have been wrongfully convicted. And they have a whole, before the reporting came out, through George Joseph, through WNYC and Gothamist, she was on her own looking into people who she believes are wrongly convicted in Mount Vernon, including by these accused police officers. Now, I'm not here to say that's right or that's wrong. I don't have all of the facts. But the fact that she was even looking into it, and she tried to get a meeting with Scarpino's office over a month ago and was ignored until just last week. So again, anyone who questions like primaries, real challenges in campaigns should rethink it, because we wouldn't even know about all of this. And he certainly wouldn't be responding to it if he wasn't being challenged in a primary.
The other thing that the DA in Atlanta said, now, one of the things, because I got a comment, he should have went to the grand jury first. He acknowledged that because of COVID, the grand juries wasn't really meeting until October, and then there were so many cases before this might not even be heard till January or something. And if he had the power, he would sign the paper right now. You know what I'm saying? And he was questioning whether the DA should be able to press the charges without going to a grand jury, and asking the legislators to think about that. And I had not considered that, but since the question was brought up, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, that would require legislation, obviously. And he was basically asking the legislature to act. I think it's definitely something worth discussing. I mean, I'm not ready to say that we should or shouldn't, do that. I mean, I think we have to, but I think it's absolutely something we should talk about. And another thing I think we should talk about, and I have brought this up previously in some debates and even mentioned it already to some legislators, is thinking about the standard for what's considered excessive force. Right now it's a reasonableness standard. Was it reasonable in the eye, was it necessary in the eyes of a reasonable police officer? And, I've heard other people talk about this too. I mean, is that too high or too much of a burden given what we know, about the realities of how this works? Should it maybe be something like, it has to have been absolutely necessary or a measure of last resort? Because a lot of things could be reasonable, but still shouldn't be done.
Right.
Right. So I think again, these are things that are complicated but important to think about and talk about. And the people you need at the table to talk about that are legislators, district attorneys who will be bringing the cases, some representation from police officers. I believe that, not someone who's just going to sit there and say, well, we shouldn't change anything, but someone who really wants to have a voice and be part of the conversation, and people from the community. Probably other people, but at least that group of people. So, I know there's a lot of like working groups and task forces being put together, but I hope that there is one that at least is comprised of those groups that can talk about those two issues. And I hope to have a seat at that table. Yeah,
because that whole thing in Atlanta, they were talking about reasonable force. They were questioning. they were pointing out that Rayshard pointed the taser at him, but in other police cases, the officer couldn't be charged because the taser is not a lethal weapon in the state of Georgia. So you kind of can't have it both ways. When it's a police officer, it's not a lethal weapon, but we shot him because he shot the taser at me. You know, like, and at that distance.
It depends on what state you're in. Like we.
Oh no,
like,
we talking about Georgia. That's what they were going back and forth in Georgia with both those.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because like in New York State, if someone takes your nightstick, you're justified in shooting him because the nightstick is deadly force. That's what we were taught. Now, whether it changed, I don't know, because I'm not intentional letting nobody get my nightstick. Because, but but the whole thing is that's usually if you're not trained in it, I mean, it's a deadly. But Georgia's law does not see a taser as a deadly weapon.
Right. And they said at that distance, because they pointed out how far away he was when he did that it could not have done but so much damage to him. And then they also pointed out that he had already pushed it 2 times. So by the time he was shot, like the taser was no use. Like it wasn't a threat at that time he was shot. Because So anyway, enough of that.
Well, that's what I said because the officer. Yeah. But I think that, I mean, the thing is, how many reviews or committees that we're going to make recommendations over the recommendations over the recommendations. I've been working corrections for 30 years. I could pull a whole folder out of different reports after every incident, after this incident, after that incident, after this incident. Now like 8 years later, we passed the chokehold bill, but it's just like I told elected officials, law enforcement. A lot of these young guys, they train mixed martial arts and all this other crazy stuff. They don't have to kill you with a chokehold. I mean, they could kill you with something else.
And George Floyd was not killed with a chokehold. He was killed by a knee through the neck. That's not a chokehold, right?
Exactly. So now can since you passed the no chokehold bill, so now can I actually use the knee to the neck because you passed the no chokehold bill? I've always said it's any violation of policy, procedure, and training that leads to serious injury or death. That covers everything. If they have passed that law, it covers everything. It covers excessive force all the way up to deadly force. Because what are you taught? What is in your policy, right? What is in your procedure? And if what you did is not enough of that, then you got a problem, right? You have a serious problem. But I think they're going to run into loopholes with these unions, with the chokehold bill down the line, because these kids, these young guys coming in, they're taking all type of different martial arts and different things like that. I did when I was in my 20s and 30s, and I know these guys are doing it too. So they can hurt you with other type of maneuvers and holds that won't be considered a chokehold.
And now, I know, your time is valuable, and you may have somewhere else to go or do right after this. Any last words you want to say to the undecided voter on why they should vote for you? Why are you the candidate to take the district attorney's office to a new place where we need to be, especially in this national climate of protest and calls for criminal justice reform? So.
Yeah, I mean, look, I really think it comes down to, what kind of leadership people want in that office, and right now we have someone who's very passive, who isn't proactive, who, like I said at the beginning, doesn't have a vision about, I'm not even sure totally understands what criminal justice reform really means, the one example he keeps going back to is how he supposedly eliminated on bail for low-level marijuana offenses before the law was passed, although he frankly did it when it was clear the law was going to be passed. But we're way past that now. We are talking about reimagining the criminal justice system. We need to redefine, and you guys are making this point, right? You're saying it isn't about eliminating one thing that a police officer can do that might kill someone. I mean, yes, that's important, but it's really about changing a culture. Right. And, you know, some of that's going to be in my job description, but some of it's just going to be like, this is what I care about. And I'm going to be the kind of DA who's going to try to bring the police to the table. Like, some of them won't, some of them will dig their heels in, and that's fine. But I believe there are some we can bring along to agree on some of the reforms that we're talking about and changing the culture. And we need them. We need those allies in the police department. And that, you know, that doesn't mean that if they resist, then we give up. But I do believe that a lot of the way to make this change happen, so it's not just another recommendation, as you say, that sits on the table, is to try to harness the people that can be changed, that are in the police departments in our county, that do understand that change is here and change needs to happen. And I believe that we have a lot of them. It's not the police unions, you know, it's about the individual people working there and the young people coming in, that they're trained in a different way, as you say, that they're not trained in the same old way. And then that prosecutors need to be, to have their culture changed. You know, it can't just be about convictions. It needs to be a culture where you can admit mistakes. You're not afraid to admit mistakes, because that's how prosecutors get into a lot of problems. It's about, you know, making it a priority to have diversion programs, to have restorative justice. I heard the DA say in one of our last debates, well, you know, restorative justice is very expensive and we're not going to have any money. Yes, I understand we're going to have budget problems, but guess what? Restorative justice programs in the long run save money. So we, you know, and you can get grants. And I mean, you can't just throw up your hands and say, well, it's too expensive, we can't do anything. That's not going to change anything. So look, I mean, if people are, satisfied with the way the criminal justice system is running in Westchester right now, then they should vote for him again. But if they think it really needs to change and they want someone who's going to put their heart and soul into trying to change it, I mean, I can't promise I'm going to be successful at everything I try. But if they want someone who's going to really try to bring different players to the table to make it happen, then that's me.
And I want to say, excuse me, there's people in the background. I wanted to say again, one of the other reasons that really stood by Black Westchester endorsing Mimi was the fact that you made the commitment publicly that you will not take donations from PBAs, police unions, where they represent police officers you might have to prosecute, or elected officials where they may be potential people you could have to prosecute, or lawyers that will face cases before your office. I really haven't heard that kind of talk before, and that was very impressive. Huh?
We never heard that talk before.
And I pledged that back in December. You know, now you're hearing this in the wake of George Floyd's murder. You're hearing a cry across the country for prosecutors to stop taking money from police unions. But yeah, we talked about this back in December. The DA right now has taken over $10,000 in donations from police unions, including this year. So, he says now he's not going to take any more, I don't know, but he certainly hasn't given any of it back or donated it to anyone.
Right. I had a question. I'm trying to find it. One person asked, one person made a comment, time for meaningful change, time to stop criminalizing parenting in Westchester. That was more of a comment.
Oh, it's right here. You're talking about Crystal's question?
Yes. Because when I close it and come back in, I lose going back to the questions. Yeah, Crystal's question.
Should Mimi be elected, who will she ensure is on her transition team to help her elect those qualified individuals? In addition, a question was raised to her about when she was appointed person in White Plains, how many African American, blacks, did she have in her leadership roles? This question was never asked, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's what she.
So, I mean, I'll answer that question first. I mean, there are no leadership roles in the White Plains office. The only leadership roles were me and my co-chief, who were appointed by the U.S. Attorney, who was Preet Bharara. There is no, everybody else there is a line prosecutor, and they're fed to the White Plains office from the downtown office. I did work on the hiring committee for the whole Southern District of New York under Preet Bharara, so not just White Plains, but also Manhattan. And while I was not in the position to be making final decisions, that was the U.S. Attorney and the Deputy U.S. Attorney and the Criminal Division Chief. I was, as I said earlier, part of screening the applications that came in and doing interviews for the sort of first round interviews. And there was an incredible push for diversity by Preet Bharara, under Obama, and Eric Holder was the AG at the time. And like I said, we did, we did panels where we went out and talked to different like Black law students associations, women's students associations, Hispanic student associations, to try and recruit people of color for positions. Went to law schools that had never previously been gone to by the U.S. Attorney's Office to try and recruit people. So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, because again, there's a difference between being the DA who is responsible for hiring, as opposed to in my office, it was people above me. But I absolutely had a role in the hiring committee, and this was something we very much prioritized. But in the White Plains office itself, it was prosecutors and then me and my co-chief. Those were the only leadership positions that there were, and Preet picked us.
Okay. Shout out to a lot of people that have tuned in. And I noticed you also, which was very telling, you also received endorsement from someone that was close to Scarpino and a supporter of Scarpino and the Yonkers City Council president, who said in his statement, even though he knew Tony for a long time and always had supported him, he was disturbed at how it went down with the Mount Vernon tapes. Tony's handling of that totally disturbed him to the point that it made him rethink a lifelong relationship and support, and then rescind it and then support you. I think that was kind of big, especially in that Yonkers community, where he's has a big voice.
Yeah, no, look, and that takes a lot of courage to switch your endorsement. Nobody does that lightly, particularly when it's somebody who's known a long time. But he, like many people, I can't tell, and there were other people who didn't necessarily switch their endorsement, but had been neutral. And when this reporting came out and they read it, and despite, Scarpino's sort of statements and defenses, they decided then to publicly endorse me. Like Kitley Colville had been trying to maintain some neutrality because of her position overseeing criminal justice as a county legislator. And I mean, as you guys know, I have a lot of endorsements in Mount Vernon, some who've been with me from day one, some who, I think we're more willing to come forward after this reporting, understandably, because it's just shocking. And Hakeem Jeffries endorsed me last week. And he's someone who, has been fighting at the federal level for criminal justice reform for a long time. And he basically said, look, if, my view of this race is that if you want change and you want to, change all the things that we're rallying about and talking about, then we need to change the district attorney. So I was quite honored by that endorsement.
Someone that's a supporter of yours and I guess works in the campaign, later she had answered Crystal in the message section before we asked the question, and she said, Crystal, those are very good points, but I will tell you that this is something I looked at before working with Mimi. Who did she have around her as part of her team? She basically has a united nation. Mimi is a friend, super smart, has integrity, the experience, and I work with her because I know she can do better. And that was her answer to Crystal. Before I actually got to answer the question, she answered it in the message section. Any last questions?
Let me address it real quick. I mean, and Elena makes not surprisingly a good point, because she's a smart lady herself. That, my campaign team is very diverse, and that is intentional. I mean, it didn't just happen. I have good people on my campaign, but I also wanted it to be diverse and reflect the county, unlike my opponent's campaign team. In terms of a transition team, I mean, look, I'm not gonna get into obviously specific names right now. I mean, that's 3 steps down the road after Tuesday. But sure, there's people in the community that I have in mind that I would love to have be part of my team or part of my office. We'll see. I mean, everyone's got things that they're doing, but it's got to include the community too. It's got to include members of the community, and I understand that, and I understand it's not something I can do alone. It's not something I should do alone. It's got to include lawyers who are actually connected to the community, and it's got to include community members who aren't lawyers as well.
Right.
Anything I didn't ask you, you want the voters to know where you at on the ballot, your social media, website, people can go from this to look up more information on you?
Yeah, so I mean, I would just highlight that at this point, basically early voting is over, but people can still send in their absentee ballots. They can be postmarked as late as Tuesday, election day. They can vote on Tuesday. The polls are open, I think, from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. It may not be their exact same polling place as usual because of COVID, so they should check that out. On our website, Mimi Rocah FORDA.com. We have information about that. They can also go to the Board of Elections website, but I encourage them to go to our website. If they're not already following me on social media, my DA page is Mimi Rocah for District Attorney, sorry. And I'm on Twitter, Mimi Rocah 1, and on Instagram, I think it's Mimi Rocah 4, the number 4 DA. So we can, and I think you have the links on your page as well.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, no, I mean, look, we're at the point that it's basically just about getting out the vote. If people are undecided and they have specific questions, through you, or they can email our campaign, hello@MimiRocah4DA. If they feel that there's questions that they need to help them decide. But I think it's a really clear choice. I mean, yes, we can, I understand that people have a lot of very specific questions and those should be answered, but the differences in our leadership and styles and vision and energy and passion about these issues is pretty stark in my view.
I want to add in closing, this is the most important election in Westchester right now, especially for communities of color. I just want to, for all of those people that I commended early on, the young people, the people out there in every one of the municipalities of Westchester protesting and calling for criminal justice reform and the national attention that we got. If we go back to what we have now, all of the work that y'all have done is for nothing. You know what I mean? This is an opportunity, and the changes that you said you want to make, this is one of the first opportunities that can be done locally by voting the current district attorney out and voting for Mimi Rocah as the new head of the district, as the new district attorney. That is the first chance that you can make, the first action outside of the protesting and all the work that you've been doing. This is the and what's next. This is the what's next. This is the first action item in the what's next. Voting in this election. You understand what I'm saying? Because we've seen, and 3 years is not a long time, but 3 years is a very long time. We have not seen this district attorney. He has been visibly absent in a lot of situations. He is coming on now as for campaign promises again, and he has failed this county and especially the city of Mount Vernon. And there's a bunch of examples in Black Westchester, and you can just Google, his record and all the stuff going on. But if you really are sick and tired of being sick and tired of what was going on locally, nationally, period, but first, everything is local. This is the first thing you can do locally. Vote in this election. And my recommendation is that you vote this cat out and you vote her in. And that's that's the first action item of the what's next after all the protesting that you physically can do yourself as the voter. And I make that very strongly. And I wanted to have you on. There's 2 days before this election. There's a lot of people that's undecided. There are a lot of links on Black Westchester if you want to look. If you can't find it, contact me, blackwestchester@gmail.com. She's giving you her information to contact her if you have specific questions that need to be addressed that you feel may not have got addressed in this interview. I apologize to some of the people. There were a lot of comments and some questions that I were not able to get to, but she said you could reach out to her at hello@MimiRocah. What was it again?
At MimiRocah4da.com.
Right. If you feel that I wasn't able to answer your question, please email her campaign and someone will get back to you on the answer. And I think this is seriously, this is if we go back, we keep doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different result. The Democratic Party keeps telling you this is our nominee. Everybody should support that person. But where has that gotten you? I'm not saying switch your party. I'm saying make up your own mind. Don't go vote for someone because the district attorney, the county chair or the party said this is the person you should vote for. You should vote for the best person in every seat. Now, especially in situations where there's a ticket, I'm not even for vote for a whole ticket. Vote for the best person in every position. But don't stop. We have to stop listening to the Democratic Party or in Republican areas, the Republican Party that gives you that vote row A all the way. That's why we keep being in the situation that we're in now. And if you want to continue doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, that is the definition of insanity. So you say you want to change, you're out there making the choice between social distancing and social justice, which is a hell of a choice to have to make, risking your lives to prove a point and make some noise. Well, this is the next part of the protest. You protest, you want to protest at the ballot box and vote this cat out of there because he has not done anything for anybody. That's it. Black Westchester endorses Mimi Rocah.
You said it better than I could, AJ.
Last words, Damon, anything you want to put out there?
People forget that Black Westchester was started of an idea when, how many was it? 4 or 5 parole officers?
4 Black parole officers.
When 4 Black New York State parole officers were pulled out of their cars. They had shields around their necks. They had vests on that said New York State Parole. They was in a state car that was registered to the New York State Parole. And they was pulled over by police over in
Ramapo.
Ramapo, put guns down, put on the ground. And we did not like the coverage that the media gave these 4 officers who dedicated their lives as parole officers. And before that, I have dealt with district attorneys in cases of police brutality. And every year, election time, we get the rigmarole. Right, we get the good story, we get coming, but something, none of them talked about reform, just reform to the justice system, reform to the DA's office, reform to the police department. None of them talked about that. We see, you know, the usual in last election, you know, Democrat nominee, everybody votes row A, and then with these 3 years, we see our result, right? And I think I was always someone who say that the district attorney was the most important person that Black people can vote for. But after God put the world on hold and put everybody inside, and for 8 minutes and 45 seconds, the whole world watched a man die with a cop with his knee to his neck. Now, the international conversation about the justice system and how communities, even poor white communities, are policed. We're all talking about it, right? We're all talking about it. But we have an election day that we can actually, you know, make a change and do something about it. So, you know, I'm nervous because this is an opportunity, you know, for us to make change. But I'm nervous because I've been doing this for 30 years, right? And at the point is that, do we really want change? Are we really ready for change? Do we really want change? Are we really ready to work for change? Put someone in the office that's willing to work with the people and for the people. You know, for change. Are we ready for that? If we are ready for that, I think people need to go out on Tuesday. They should go out. They should take that 5 minutes and find your polling station and go vote. I think the Mount Vernon tapes says it all. You know, let me tell you, if you just popped on the planet Earth and you just heard the Mount Vernon tapes, I think you are intelligent enough to say something's wrong with that guy. He shouldn't be there. Of all the other stories that we give, I think the Mount Vernon tape says it all. So you know, I'm asking people to go out there on the 23rd, you know, vote for Mimi Rocah, and let's invest. You know, we have to invest, and we invest in the justice system, you know, through our vote, and we all can be stakeholders in change. I think that's what it's all about. Working with George Lattimore, you know, on those committees, you know, I see the process can be done. It's not an overnight process, but it's a process that takes its time, because we're dealing with 100 years of legislation, as Michelle Alexander in the new Jim Crow, that we have to try to address and reverse. But we have to have people in office that are willing, you know, to take on that, and willing to sit down with the powerful police unions. You know, I don't really think they're that powerful, but powerful police unions, you know, to sit down and bring them to the table also. And elected officials have to bring them to the table. But it's easy for them, right? They just got to put a raise to it. They'll sign off anything. But we have to really, you know, put people in place. And this is our opportunity, Westchester. I mean, we complained about Janine Pirro. We really complained about Janet DeFiore. We complained about Scarpino. Now we have someone that's coming out of the gate saying, look, the system needs to be reformed. The system needs to be changed. Give me the opportunity to work with the community and work with other law enforcement agencies in changing the system. We have never heard that before. Never heard that. In my 30 years in law enforcement, I've never heard that before. So I think we have the opportunity, and let's go out there and let's put Mimi Rocah in office so we could begin that process. And that's all. And thank you, Mimi, for giving us your time tonight.
Yeah, I thank you for your time, and I will say here on the record, and Richard Thomas has found this out. If I support you, I'm gonna hold you accountable. So let that be known. Like, I'm not just telling y'all to vote. Like, I'm gonna.
I have no doubt that if I'm not living up
I just want to say that on the record now. I'm not just saying vote without the accountability part. I'm gonna be fair.
I know. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we thank you for your time. Any last words? And as we out of here, vote Mimi Rocah for Westchester DA Tuesday.
Yes.
Thanks, you guys. Thanks so much for having me. And thank you, to everyone who's listening for taking the time to listen, because it is an important race. It's Obama said it a couple weeks ago. He said, this is where you make the change that you're protesting and rallying about, is at the DA office level, other offices too, but this is the one that's on the ballot, right? I mean, mayors matter, and I think we have a great opportunity now with the new mayor, police chiefs, and whoever's in charge of law enforcement. And the DA plays a really important role. It's not the only role, but it's an important role. And there's so much more we could do with that office. It can be an engine for change.
Exactly.
With that, this is the end of the Black Westchester Presents the People Before Politics radio show, episode 266, the pre-primary edition. You could be doing anything else right now, but you decided to ride with us, and we greatly appreciate it. Go out and vote Tuesday. Make your vote count. And until next week, we out. Peace.
Peace. Good night.